What do the New York Giants need to do to top the Seattle Seahawks besides, of course, outscore them? I have that plus the game's biggest matchup and more on today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast, coming your way next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family. Your team every day. My name is Patricia Traina at Patricia_Traina. And today is game day, ladies and gentlemen. So happy game day to everybody. We hope it'll be a happy game day. The New York Giants hosting the Seattle Seahawks at MetLife Stadium. Monday Night Football. And it's going to be an interesting game for sure. So special shout out first to my everydayers, my subtexters, everybody in between. You guys all rock. Thank you so much for your support. On today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast, I put together 3 keys that I think will help the Giants to victory. So we'll talk about that. Then I have identified what I think is one of the biggest matchups in the game. So we'll talk about that in segment 2. And then in segment 3, God forbid the Giants lose. Is it the end of the world for the team? So we'll discuss that a little bit. Hopefully, it won't come to fruition, but we've got to talk about it nonetheless. So that is our agenda. Again, thank you so much for tuning in to Locked On Giants podcast, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, let's get into it. Keys to the New York Giants victory. Now, obviously, folks, one key, as we all know, is they're going to have to outscore the Seattle Seahawks, a team that has put up, I believe, 37 points the last 2 games. The Giants, they're averaging like 14.3 points a game, which is not very good. So it's like, okay, right there, you figure they have an uphill battle because, we have not seen the explosive offense that the Giants have basically advertised or, that we saw in the summer and in the spring before that. We haven't seen the cohesiveness, part of that's the offensive line's fault. On defense, we just, we've seen the aggressiveness, but we haven't seen the results. So what are 3 things that the Giants can do to ensure that they win this game? All right, let's start off with number 1. Go pass happy. Now, on Saturday, the team issued their final injury report. Andrew Thomas is out, which is not good news. And Andrew Thomas is now week to week, by the way. Saquon Barkley is listed as doubtful. I do not expect him to play tonight. And the reason for that is twofold. Number 1, every player that's been listed as doubtful with head coach Brian Daboll at the helm has not played. But more importantly, you look at the Seattle run defense. They are currently the 6th best run defense in the league. So if you're putting together a game plan, you probably want to attack the opponent where they are weakest. And where are the Seahawks weakest? Obviously, they are weakest in the pass defense. So, if you're considering whether or not to play Saquon, you probably take that into consideration along with, how he feels and, how he looks in the pregame warmups. But I'm not expecting him to play for what it's worth. So let's talk about the Giants going pass happy. And obviously, this is contingent on the offensive line doing a better job in holding up on pass protection. Now, the Seahawks defense has allowed 49 plays of 10 or more yards. That is tied for the league lead. All right. The pass defense for the Seahawks is currently ranked 31st. They are allowing an average of 328 yards per game, and they are also ranked 28th in yards per pass attempt completed, which is an average of 7.51 yards per pass play. So really, for the Giants, there should be no excuse. And this includes, the offensive line having to play better. Even if they've got a max protect, there should be no excuse not to go after that pass defense. Now, here's the other thing. The Seahawks are reportedly getting safety Jamal Adams back, but they're still banged up in their secondary. Corners Trey Brown and Artie Burns have both been declared out, and their other cornerback, Kobe Bryant, is doubtful for this competition. So that being said, a guy that I'm looking to have a big game for the Giants. Hopefully he will have an increased role over what he had last week. Wan'Dale Robinson working from the slot. That should be fun to watch. I'm hoping that Jalen Hyatt gets a little bit more involved in this game because, we have seen him not get enough reps, enough opportunities in this game. But most importantly, this could be the game, fingers crossed, that Darren Waller just totally breaks out and has a massive game. So wouldn't that be nice if you're the Giants to get Darren Waller finally involved in the game? So that's my first key to a Giants victory. Key number 2, this is kind of obvious, but I'm going to say it anyway. To borrow Wink Martindale's quote, chart him. Okay, so Wink Martindale, when he spoke to the media on Friday, basically said, he was asked about the tackling issue. And he said, okay, you know what? We worked on it. Chart them. See how many we have on Monday night. Folks, I don't think they're going to have as many against the Seahawks as they did against the 49ers. But there's usually missed tackles. There's going to be some. But here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. They cannot be sloppy against Seattle running back Kenneth Walker III. And I continue to be concerned about the Giants' run defense. I mean, that's where you see a lot of, problems coming up with the tackling, the bad angles, guys falling off of blocks, not fighting off stiff arms. Walker is tied for 6th in the league with Arizona's James Conner with 6 apiece in terms of broken tackles. He's averaging 3.09 yards after contact on his rushing attempts, which is 12th in the league amongst running backs with at least 35 attempts. The opponents against the New York Giants have been running the ball on first down, and they're picking up nearly 5 yards per carry. So when you have 2nd and short, 3rd and short, now the offense can do whatever the heck it wants. All right. So the Giants cannot have missed tackles. That run defense has got to be better than what it has been. There's no room for very many errors. And if the Giants continue to look the way they have, then I hate to say it, folks, but we're going to be in for another long evening. All right. I'm going to give you one more key. Get after Geno Smith. All right. Basic, right? You figure, okay, you stop the run, you rush the passer. It's elementary, right? Let me give you a little bit of background. Geno Smith in the last 2 games, as I mentioned, has led his team to victories each week of the last 2, scoring 37 points. Smith does, however, in certain years, have a history of being prone to turning over the ball. Now, this year, he's only thrown 1 interception. However, I went and I looked it up on Pro Football Reference. Smith has a bad throw rating of 18.6% on his pass attempts. All right, so 18 of his pass attempts this year and have been danger balls. All right, now we're not talking spikes or throwaways. We're talking passes that basically he put up there that were considered dangerous passes. So that is something to keep an eye on there. Now, why is that to keep an eye on? The Giants are one of 2 teams without a takeaway this season and one of 4 without an interception. If there was ever an opportunity for them to change that narrative and start getting, erase that goose egg that's on the board, this would be the week, right? If they can do that, get some turnovers, give their struggling offense a short field, guess what? They just might be able to win on Monday Night Football, which, by the way, has not been very kind to them of late. They just have not been kind. The Giants, are just. I think I forget what their record is, but I know it's not very good on Monday Night Football. So hopefully they could pull this off. The Giants, according to our friends over at FanDuel, currently a 1.5 point underdog at home. And with good reason, they just haven't played well. But hopefully with these three keys, they can turn it around. All right, folks, coming up next, I have my biggest matchup. So I'm going to give you that right after this. Hey, Giant fans, these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available, right? So that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. I myself have used LinkedIn Jobs to find writers and editors over for the site Giants Country that I run on Fan Nation. And the process is not only super easy, but a big time saver. Simply add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. And simple tools like screening questions make it super easy to focus on the candidates with just the right skill and experience so that you can quickly prioritize whom you'd like to interview and hire. So don't spend time sorting through endless resumes and dead-end leads. Put LinkedIn Jobs to work for you today for free by visiting linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. Terms and conditions apply. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. You got me, Patricia Traina, here as we get you ready for tonight's Monday Night Football game. New York Giants, Seattle Seahawks. Some final thoughts, some final, matchups to talk about. I'm going to give you a couple of matchups in this game that I think are going to be important. Okay, I mentioned in the last segment that one of the keys was to tackle better because I was concerned about the run defense against, Kenneth Walker. And, the Seahawks also have Zach Charbonnet who, to form that 1-2 punch. But that run defense is a huge, huge key for this New York Giants team. If they cannot stop that run, especially with the receivers that the Seahawks have, we're in for a long night, folks. So, I had that run defense rated number one, more so even than the pass defense, and I know that the young cornerbacks, the rookies have struggled. They've been inconsistent, but I'm actually more concerned about the run defense than I am about the Giants pass defense. Not to be confused with the pass rush, which is a whole other topic. Now, the good news is the Giants will be getting Azeez Ojulari back for this game. That should help the pass rush because say what you want about him, but Azeez Ojulari, when he is on the field, is productive as a pass rusher. And who knows, maybe that opens things up for the other pass rushers, Kayvon Thibodeau and the guys up front, Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence. Maybe they can do stuff to open things up and, get more pressures and whatnot. So that's a matchup that I'm keeping an eye on. The other matchup from the Giants offensive perspective, Darren Waller versus the pass defense. Now, it's interesting. Somebody asked me the other day, I think it was on Giants Country, actually, what have I seen from Darren Waller? And, ever since this hamstring issue popped up again with him, and by the way, Waller hasn't been on the injury report. You'll notice he hasn't been on the injury report last, I want to say 2 weeks, right? So he hasn't gotten his veteran day off, which I suspected was just, a way to give him a rest. But anyway, Waller to me has not looked as explosive And, there were a couple balls, if I remember correctly, or maybe one ball in the game against, I want to say the 49ers, where it was a high ball. And Waller couldn't get it. It basically went off his hands. And what's interesting about that is that we saw Waller in the spring and in the summer go up to the highest point of his catch radius to bring in balls. All right. So the fact that he wasn't able to leap to get these balls made you wonder if that hamstring was limiting his explosiveness. So that being said, this can be a get right game for Waller if they can take advantage of that Seahawks secondary, which, as I mentioned earlier, hasn't been, cohesive, playing well together. So Waller, with Saquon Barkley out, and well, actually Saquon hasn't been declared out, but I'm pretty sure he's going to be. Waller's going to be a key player in this game, a guy that if they can get him up the seam, maybe that opens up some stuff for the outside, because I really believe that the Giants' course of action is going to be to attack the Seahawks defensive secondary. I don't anticipate them really running the ball. I mean, I think they'll try to be balanced within reason, but if I had to take a guess, I would say it's probably going to be more along the lines of 60-40 in terms of the passing game, because you play against the opponent's weakness if you want to win. And, I'm fairly certain that's how they're going to roll. Now we'll see. I've been wrong before. I'm not in Kafka's office to see what the game plan looks like, but that to me makes the most sense if the Giants want to, have a chance at winning this game. The other, obviously, factor we have to keep an eye on, the offensive line. This is going to be the fourth different starting combination in as many games, which is just wild if you think about it. All right. 4 different combinations in 4 games. Andrew Thomas, as I mentioned, is out with the hamstring. He is week to week. And who knows if he's going to be ready for Miami. But, we'll talk about that when we get closer to Miami. Ben Bredeson is back. So he was cleared from the concussion protocol. So the anticipated starting line is going to be from left to right: Josh Azudu, Ben Bredeson, John Michael Schmitz, Marcus McKethan, and Evan Neal. That is the new combination. All right. Bredeson being the change from the week prior. So that offensive line has got to hold up. Now, I don't think necessarily that the Seattle defensive front is like the 49ers defensive front, to where you have to max protect a whole lot. But I believe they do some stunting that, the Giants have struggled with. So got to make sure that they have their protections assignments down and, just don't get beaten by power and speed, which we have seen some of those offensive linemen get beaten by. So, all right. So those are my matchups. Now coming up, worst case scenario, the Giants lose tonight. What does that mean for the season going forward? We'll talk about it next. Hey, Giant fans, snap into NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use and you can bet on everything from spreads to player props and more. So go on, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get started. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. You have Patricia Traina, P-Train. And again, thank you so much for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. If you watch on YouTube, your first watch of the day. Just real quick for programming purposes, on Tuesday, we will have the wrap up. I will do the show for, as soon as I wake up on Tuesday from the late night game. If I have enough energy, maybe I'll do it, when I get home from the game. But Tuesday's podcast will be a wrap up. I don't think I'm going to have David Turner with me for Tuesday, but I may look to see if I can get him on for Wednesday. So that's to be determined. And then on Thursday, crossover Thursday, as you know, which we do every Thursday here on the Locked On Network. So that'll be with Kyle Krebs, who is the host of Locked On Miami Dolphins. And then on Friday, my tentative plan is to have good friend Alan Poupar, who is the publisher of All Dolphins, which is part of the Fan Nation Network, to have him on and kind of have a two-person roundtable, if you will, about the Miami games. So that is the plan for the week. And of course, if there is significant news to talk about, I will have shorts for you on YouTube. And if I have to do a longer show, if something is really, comes out of left field, obviously I will do an emergency podcast for you. I won't leave you hanging. So not to worry. All right, folks, got to talk about this. I don't want to, but it's a question that somebody asked me and said, hey, can you talk about this on your podcast? And I said, okay. I said, I don't want to jinx anything. So I'm sitting here and you can't hear me, but I'm very gently knocking on wood that this doesn't happen. But what happens if the Giants lose to the Seahawks? What does that mean for the season? What does that mean for the franchise? Does it mean, the sky is falling? Where are we going to be at that point? All right. So here's my feeling, guys. I am not confident, and I hate to say this because you know me, guys. I'm usually very optimistic, but I'm not so confident that the Giants are going to be able to get past Miami and Buffalo. Those two teams concern me. After Buffalo, they've got Washington. I think they've got a puncher's chance of beating Washington. But here's the thing. If the Giants lose to Seattle, they will fall to 1-3. And teams that start off 1-3, I believe, have a 14.7% chance of making the playoffs. Whereas teams that start off 2-2, I think their chances of making the playoffs is at 37.7. So, this is a game that the Giants, if they're going to win a game in these next 3 weeks, this is the game that they should really try and win. If they lose it, then, I've said this before on the pod, I'll say it again. We've got to ask, what the heck were they doing? They had 11 days to clean things up. Now, I get it. You're not going to clean everything up, but, the major things you could probably clean up and get right. And if they don't get that stuff right, the tackling, the pass pro, receivers getting open, all that stuff, if they don't get that right, then what are the coaches doing with these players when they kick us out of the practice session? I don't know. That's not going to be, something, an easy pill to swallow. And here's the other thing. With each mounting loss, is that taking its toll on guys? And I say that because, losing does take a toll. It can wear you out. I know it takes a toll on me to where it's like, okay, here we go. I got to find another way to talk about a loss. It's hard. It's hard for me. So I can just imagine what it's like for the team. And I think from a bigger perspective, folks, if this team loses to Seattle, can Brian Daboll pull them out of the funk? Brian Daboll, talked about handling adversity. And it doesn't get much worse than, when you're on a losing streak like this. And depending on, if the loss is a really bad one. So how do they handle that? Do guys start to just throw up their hands and say, look, we don't have what we need to compete? Maybe do they start to question things? Gosh, let's hope not. Because if it gets to that point, then I don't have much hope for this season. So I am hoping, as I'm sure you guys and gals are, for a win on Monday night. It's not impossible. The Seahawks are not the 49ers, but the Giants have got to play better than what they have to start the season. Both sides of the ball, folks. And short of that, well, I don't know what to tell you. Other than I hope you'll still tune into the Locked On Giants podcast, because we'll still have a lot to talk about in terms of where the Giants go from here. So that being said, folks, that's going to do it for me on today's episode. I want to thank you for tuning in as always. And again, tomorrow I will have the recap, hopefully a happy recap of the Giants Seattle Monday night game. So until then, everybody, thanks again for making us your first listen of the day, or if you watch on YouTube, your first watch of the day. And I will see you on Tuesday.